Wind was devastating.
Whoa.
The surge along the coast was devastating.
It's almost biblical in proportion.
You can't go anywhere. You'll get killed if you walk outside.
I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared. I was scared.
There's nothing you can do. You just got to wait it out. Mother Nature's going to take its toll no matter what.
After the storm, it was like the scene from the Night of the Living Dead, where you're just a bunch of zombies walking around. Everybody was just shell-shocked.
From the Weather Channel, this is Storm Stories with meteorologist Jim Cantori.
September 7th, 2004. Hurricane Ivan bears down on the Caribbean. A Category 3 hurricane, it pummels Grenada, battering the small island with winds up to 120 miles per hour.
On the devastated island of Grenada, the Red Cross estimates 2/3 of the people are homeless.
39 people lose their lives. As it moves westward across the Caribbean, Ivan gets increasingly fierce. By the time it strikes Jamaica on September 11th, it is a strong Category 3, becoming one of the most powerful hurricanes on record to hit the island. Massive flooding from more than 2 feet of rain devastates the island, inflicting hundreds of millions of dollars in damage. 17 people are killed, and 18,000 are left homeless. And Ivan is far from done. Next in its path, the tiny island of Grand Cayman. In 1932, a Category 4 hurricane hit the Cayman Islands. Buildings were washed out to sea, and dozens of people lost their lives. For over 70 years, Grand Cayman was spared another direct hit. The island flourished and became a center for international banking and tourism.
The Cayman Islands, even Grand Cayman, is a very small island. And to have a very powerful hurricane, the very tiny quadrant of the hurricane with the strongest winds hit that tiny island, it's not that easy. So many times, even a hurricane that goes fairly close to the island, the worst winds will miss it.
Many assume that their good luck will continue.
We've been pretty lucky as far as hurricanes here on the island. We've had near misses, but 9 times out of 10, you don't get too worried about it because tracks go one way or the other all the time. Make sure that you have all your batteries powered up and ready to go. Make sure you go.
Jay Earhart, news director at Radio Cayman, monitors the progress of the hurricane.
Make sure you're batting down the hatches. Make sure that
he warns his listeners to prepare for it.
And the Cayman Islands are next in line to feel the brunt of Hurricane Ivan. We continue to see people taking no chances here. They know this is a powerful and dangerous storm that has already killed more than 24 people.
As a news organization, we tell people, all right, make sure you get your provisions in order, make sure you're all set, just in case we're without power, just in case we're without water. And of course, all the near misses we had before, people got maybe, I wouldn't say a little complacent, but they just thought, okay, we're confident, we'll be okay.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Residents Andy and Carolyn McAlpine follow the news of Ivan's progress. They've lived on Grand Cayman for 15 years, but they've never experienced a hurricane. They prepare to ride it out.
Go the candles out, Chloe.
Good girl. I was just like many thinking, no, it would probably go by and it wouldn't be a big deal.
We've had so many hurricanes that pass by us, you know, a 90-degree turn at the last minute. It used to be like the boy that cried wolf.
But of course, as the storm loomed or got closer and closer, we had to pay more attention to the media and what they were telling us.
As it becomes clear that Grand Cayman is in for a direct hit, they take steps to fortify their home.
Say cheese, Chloe. Cheese.
With growing anxiety, the family has to make a tough decision.
What we're going to do with my daughter. We decided to get both of them off the island, and I chose to stay here, to be in the house, and if it was bad, rescue as much as we could.
As the hurricane draws closer, Andy manages to get Carolyn and their daughter Chloe on one of the last planes off the island. He then returns to his house to brace for Ivan. His daughter's nanny and a friend seek shelter at his home as well.
Even then, we could tell that it was coming a little closer, was getting bigger and bigger, and it was going to be quite an intense storm.
The following day, September 11th, 2004, the first bands of the hurricane begin buffeting the island.
Well, it's 9:30 on Saturday. As you can see, the storm's already picked up. Already we're getting the outside bands. See the rain coming down, the palm trees moving.
The eye of the hurricane is still 200 miles away, but already the winds are gusting up to 60 miles an hour.
Here the gusts. This should increase throughout the day. So most of the boats are moored out in the middle of the canals. Clean pool now. You'll see. Here's the front. See the trees. See the sheets of rain coming down as the wind picks up.
As the hours pass, the situation outside becomes increasingly dangerous, and the worst is yet to come.
Whoa, just brutal.
In a nearby neighborhood, Andy's friends, Ian and Catherine Dawson-James, are preparing to weather the hurricane as well.
I was 9 months pregnant and didn't think I could get on a plane. And that was just really naive of me, I think. And so we basically came home, boarded up our house, and stayed in our house the whole time.
We sort of made a shelter in a bedroom in the back of the building. Tried to make the best out of it, you know, try to keep a nice, calm atmosphere.
As the hurricane draws closer, Ian tries to insulate his family from the ordeal.
Outside, the weather was really, really windy, and the water started to rise, but my husband insisted that myself and Miles, our son, stayed in the back bedroom. All we could hear was the wind and a few tiles flying. It was just the fact that I mean, I could have given birth at any moment. That was the scary part.
A 9-month pregnant woman and a 4-year-old boy in the house. You know, the main thing for me was to not be alarmist, to try and keep everything very even and level-headed and not make it a bad situation.
But staying calm becomes more difficult as the rising water from the hurricane engulfs the island. Suddenly, Ian's home is surrounded by water.
Canal was now all around us, and the water was 4 feet up around the windows and doors. So, you know, I didn't let the family come out and see that. They were out of harm's way in the bedroom. You know, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared. I was scared.
As the night wears on, the hurricane punishes Grand Cayman. Huge waves and strong winds cause flooding over as much as 75% of the island. Trees snap and homes crumble in fierce winds, in some locations gusting up to 170 miles per hour. And sunrise brings a realization that the hurricane is only getting stronger.
I was awoken by the storm. 6:30 a.m. Saturday, September 12th. This thing had picked up, and we were right in the height of it. The winds were probably 150 to 175. If you've seen wind tunnels before and the noise that can come out of them, or the sound of a plane, that's what you're hearing, and it did intensify. This is at the peak. The house would shake. There was debris flying. Tiles were coming off roofs. Coconuts flying at 150 miles an hour. You don't want to be anywhere outside. So I got scared. I mean, I'm sitting inside, but I'm certainly not safe from this.
Andy's fears are well justified.
I noticed our pot lights in the living room started to drip, and I knew that rain had come into our attic somehow. And then I saw the sheetrock come down in various spots. Everything happened too quickly after that.
Suddenly, the roof over Andy's head caves in.
Part of our gable from our roof had collapsed in, and you could actually see outside. And that's when it got very noisy, very loud. I was in shock, I think, at that point, because I'm thinking, like, now we're really in trouble.
Hurricane winds howl and rain and debris fall into the house. Andy and the women take desperate shelter in a bedroom where the roof is straining under Ivan's winds.
They were praying loudly and worried about, we've got to get out of here, this is going to get worse. And I said, you can't go anywhere, you'll get killed if you walk outside.
As his house buckles under the force of the hurricane, Andy makes one last attempt to call his wife.
I got a phone call, and it's Andy. He says, we have no roof in the living room. It's gone. I couldn't believe it. I'm shocked. And then we got disconnected. I had no idea. Is he dead or alive? What's happening?
September 11th, 2004. Hurricane Ivan batters Grand Cayman.
The wind was devastating. The surge along the coast was devastating. Some wind gusts were up into the 160 mile per hour range. Sustained winds estimated in the Category 4 range around 135 to 140 miles per hour. But there was hardly a structure standing that didn't have some kind of damage to it.
Andy McAlpine is trapped in his home, and the roof is being ripped off.
I was in shock, because now all of a sudden we've got a major hole in our roof. Basically a quarter of our roof is gone, and it's open to the elements. So the rain is coming in. The water from the storm surge was around the house. A lot of things go running through your mind at that point. This could turn into quite a disaster for this house and us. Thankfully the power was off, so there wasn't a worry of electrocution, but there was metal dangling, and that came crashing down, and you wouldn't want to be underneath that when a piece of metal from lighting or something had collapsed. That would not have been good.
His home ripping apart, Andy takes refuge in the rear of the house.
We ended up going to the back of the house at that point. The roof was still good there, but the noise at the front of the house in the living room was just too much to listen to. At that point you realize there's nothing you can do. You just got to wait it out, and Mother Nature is going to take its toll no matter what.
You just see the wind and the rain and just palm trees bowing halfway over. At the worst point, it sounded like two freight trains, and one coming this way and one coming the other way, and it was coming right at you. It was just howling wind everywhere.
At Radio Cayman, Jay Earhart broadcast live as frantic listeners trapped in the hurricane call the station begging for help.
One of the calls that I'll always remember, but she calls the show and she says she's got water up to the top of the kitchen counters in her house. Storm flooding is coming in. Her roof is blown off, and she's got 3 little kids. And she's on top of the kitchen counter wondering when it's going to end. And you just try and issue the right words of encouragement and tell her to hang on and be okay. And it got to me, I guess, the pressure. I mean, I know I didn't have any of these great hairs before Ivan.
Meanwhile, Ian Dawson James and his wife Catherine endure the hurricane in their home. She's 9 months pregnant with their second child. And outside, Ivan is raging.
The experience was awe-inspiring. It was almost biblical in proportion. The ocean rose up and engulfed the island, and our house was completely surrounded with water. We're at the height of the storm, and the sound of the wind, I'll never forget. It was like a pressure cooker. It was an intense whistling sound. It had an eeriness to it, but at the same time, you couldn't help but look through the window and just, be in awe of Mother Nature, because it's an incredible thing to actually witness a hurricane of this magnitude. And I actually put my hand on the glass pane of the patio door, and I could feel the glass pane flexing under the pressure variances during the storm. And that was quite frightening, because I was worried then that maybe the roof would blow off, or the windows would implode. So it was back to the bedroom and fan my wife some more, and it was a very intense, surreal experience.
Ivan pummels the island for nearly a day and a half. On Monday afternoon, survivors emerge from their homes. The wreckage is stunning.
It was like the scene from the Night of the Living Dead, where you just a bunch of zombies walking around. Everybody was just shell-shocked. It was just, couldn't believe that they were alive and that everybody else was alive.
Ian and Catherine survey the damage to their home.
There was roof tiles on the floor, there was trees across our driveway. Both our cars were complete write-offs.
It was like a blitzkrieg. Everything that you find familiar about your property is changed. You know, obviously we're happy that we made it through the storm and everybody was safe. It was now a time to think about what do we do next. And obviously with Catherine being 9 months pregnant, you know, the thoughts of if she goes into labor, what do we do? We were actually having breakfast and Catherine started to go into labor the very next morning.
They drive to a hospital negotiating streets filled with debris.
Got to the hospital, it was horrible because there was no power there. And then Ian heard on the radio that Cayman Airways was flying out and anyone who was like a medical emergency or people that really, really needed to get off the island could leave.
And I just said to my wife, we've got to go, you can't stay here and have a baby. We immediately grabbed a couple of things, put it in a bag, and we went to the airport. At the door was armed security guards and police, and people were begging to get off the island and said, my wife is 9 months pregnant and she's in labor and she needs to get to a hospital. And they very kindly let us in.
Ian and Catherine board the emergency flight as Catherine's contractions quicken.
The scary part on the plane is that my contractions went from 5 minutes to 3 minutes apart, so they were like preparing to have India on the plane, I think.
I said to the airline attendant that we only have 3 minutes, and she said, no, so it's 20 minutes until we get to Miami. And I said, no, my wife's contractions are only 3 minutes apart.
September 12, 2004. The tiny island of Grand Cayman has endured 36 hours of punishment from Hurricane Ivan. Ian Dawson James and his pregnant wife Catherine survived the hurricane, but the next day she goes into labor and needs to be medevaced out to Miami.
As it happened, we were flying over Cuba and my wife was having her contractions every 3 minutes.
When they land, Catherine is moments away from giving birth. A waiting ambulance rushes her to a hospital.
They basically wheeled me into the delivery room and India was born in 5 minutes. At the end of the day, everything was cool. It seemed like more of a happy experience to me than a frightening, scary experience.
I think we were very, very lucky. There were many stories that I heard of people that had life-threatening situations happen to them.
But while Catherine and Ian celebrate their daughter's birth in the safety of a Miami hospital, Andy McAlpine's family fears for his life. It has been over a day since Andy's wife Carolyn lost contact with Andy when the roof of his house collapsed.
There was no communication. I had no idea. Is he dead or alive? What's happening? And it was the worst 24 hours of my life. And then all of a sudden I got a phone call from one of the other mothers. Her husband, he came to the house and found Andy. He was alive.
2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. Good old barbecues survived. I tried to call my wife, but I had no reception, so I couldn't speak to anybody.
Having survived the hurricane, Andy takes stock of the destruction around him. The floors of his house are covered in water, his furniture destroyed.
Our bed will have to go. It's wet.
The roof of his home ripped off. He wanders through his home, stunned.
I saved the Barbie and princess dresses. It's right out of Halloween. Our front yard. That was our big palm tree. So I said it looks like I've been in a drive-by shooting. Those 2 boats washed up. I remember going back into my daughter's room and looking out the window thinking, what the hell just happened? This is just a nightmare.
A few days later, Andy flies off the island and is reunited with his family in Toronto.
If my house was flattened, I could care less. My husband was alive.
Miraculously, there are only 2 recorded deaths on Grand Cayman during Hurricane Ivan. But the hurricane causes an estimated $2 billion of damage on Grand Cayman and will go on to devastate Gulf Shores, Alabama and Pensacola, Florida. Those who endured the hurricane now face a new test.
The aftermath of a hurricane is more soul-searching than the actual hurricane itself. Trying to get things back to normal was very stressful.
And the experience has left a lasting impression on survivors.
I have a lot more respect for what nature can unleash.
I think it changes you for the better. It's a humbling experience, it really is.
For the Weather Channel, I'm meteorologist Jim Cantori. Your local forecast is next.